There's a campaign aiming to let voters in Massachusetts reverse the adoption of new curriculum frameworks for public schools. These are known as the Common Core frameworks, which are being adopted in Boston. Our guest is part of that process as a teacher and trainer at the Orchard Gardens K-8 school in Roxbury. We'd like to welcome Ryan Casey. Thank you very much for being with us, Ryan.
Thank you.
First of all, talk about what you're doing and what you're helping the teachers accomplish.
So when you walk into a teacher's classroom who's teaching math in using the standards of the Common Core, you're likely to see students really struggling to come up with the ideas themselves. So our old set of standards kind of describe the end result, what the skills students could have. You could walk into the classroom and see that the students could multiply a certain number. But the language in the Common Core set of standards really makes sure that the students can explain what is meant when they're multiplying those numbers, and they can really explain the process. So sure, they can still do it quickly and efficiently, but they also really know what's behind it.
Right, because one of the things that makes me a little iffy on Common Core is it looks like an attempt to universalize something that is in a way very customized. And I'm saying, can you really do that with students?
It's funny you say that because I actually feel I have more freedom under this set of standards than I did in the last. So as a teacher, it's my job to take the goals for my students and figure out how to tell the story in the way that makes sense for my students. So I teach two classes. I teach a class in the morning and a class in the afternoon. My classes don't look exactly the same. They're both being taught Common Core materials, but the way I tell the story is a little bit different because I know the students best. And the way Brianna thinks about math in the afternoon might be a little bit different than the way Kevin thinks about it in the morning. So I'm telling a different story, even though the end goal is the same thing.
Well, you also, as you mentioned, you have to tell the story in a way that suits the students, and you've got students here, a lot of them from disadvantaged families, a lot of language learners. So what do you do to connect?
As a math teacher, I'm teaching the students how to think in a new language. It's math. It's the language of math. It's a language that is represented with symbols. It's represented with oral language and pictures. So all my students, whether they have English as a first language or whether they're learning English, are also learning the language of math. And so actually I think there's a lot of richness that my students who speak Spanish or Cape Verdean Creole, they're bringing another language into the classroom, and we can actually reference that a lot. So there are some challenges for them to access the material, but they also have other strengths that it's my job to figure out how to use.
One of my phobias about math is that I just won't be able to keep up with what's being presented by the teacher, and even if I'm trying to pay attention. So I mean, what about these students?
That's a good question, and it's something my students and I talk about all the time. The way the Common Core is rigorous. It sets up very high standards for my students, and it sets up very high standards for me. Some days it doesn't look pretty. Some days I haven't made the best decisions in how I'm going to present the material to the students, but I think all of us in life, part of is learning how to deal with challenges. And so sometimes it's challenging, but what's important is that the students and I believe that through our confusion, we can keep coming together as a community over and over and over, and we're going to eventually reach these really rigorous standards.
Talk about the goals at the end of this, because when I grew up, math was much more formulaic, and I was told that this is something you needed because you had to be exact about something, you had to get it quick, you had to get everything in order. Mm-hmm. What are you aiming for with math with students now?
So you said the word exact, and I think that's interesting. There are 8 process standards, standards that are about the student's mathematical thinking. One of those is about precision. Now, this is something that we should be thinking about as teachers all the way from kindergarten through 12th grade. And part of being good at math is knowing when is it that we have to be exact and when is it that an estimate is okay? Because in real life, scientists, engineers, sometimes the estimate is going to be okay. Sometimes they're going to need something to the 1,000th of a millimeter. It depends on the context. And what we're trying to do is teach our students how to think in these ways, because different situations call for example, different levels of precision.
Well, what we hear a lot about with Common Core is critical thinking, and this is not just about math.
Right.
But how does that factor into what you do?
I think critical thinking is part of the reason I became a teacher. The best part of my day is when I see students really struggling with something, thinking deeply, when you see change in shifts in how students think. We want our students to be critical thinking citizens. We want our students to be active citizens. A huge part of that is critical thinking, and it seems like school is a great place to really develop the skills of critical thinking for every student, no matter where they're coming from.
Well, when people are trying to size up Common Core, one of the things that they're going to be doing inevitably is they're going to be lumping in the curriculum with the assessments, and there can be problems with the assessments that are not the creation of the curriculum. But so how should people process that?
It's difficult, and I think it's important to remember we're in a transition time. And so what the Common Core is a list of standards. It's a list of goals. Curriculum is how we're going to get there, and then there's the assessments that are how we see whether or not we've achieved in doing that. The curriculum and assessments, we still have a lot of autonomies in schools possibly on how to do that. And I think that's all being developed. People are still developing Common Core curricula, and we're still working on the Common Core assessments. That's different than the goal of the Common Core standards, which is what's on the ballot initiative.
Of course, another way people might come at this is saying, look, why do we need something that's pretty much national in character when we seem to be pretty good at setting goals and frameworks right here in Massachusetts or even within the city of Boston. So why not just have our own?
I think equity is what comes to mind. We do have students in the Boston Public Schools, we have students who move. If a student moves from Georgia to here, it would be great if that student was learning the same goals, the same set of standards in Georgia that they were here, and vice versa. If we had a student move to another state, it would be great if they were working on the same thing. It has also really impacted me in my ability to collaborate with teachers from all across the country. I can call up a friend in Ohio or a friend in Florida or my brother in Illinois, and we can talk about what is it that we're doing, because we're all doing the same thing. So in that sense, I think it's very powerful.
What do you hear from your colleagues at Orchard Gardens?
It's difficult. We want support in doing it better. We also see that it's getting results where we're seeing kids being able to do things that they weren't able to do under the previous set of standards.
All right. Thank you very much for being with us.
Yep.
Ryan
Thank you.
Casey from the Orchard Gardens K-8 school.